One thing I reckon we can all do without is that moment when a mixture of fear, dread and adrenaline hits us, and it's called worry. So I used to be a terrible worrier, but I don't do it so much now. So I'm going to run through a few things that I do when that moment arrives, when perspective kind of checks out and you find yourself descending into that black area where nothing but fear and dread take over and you start to worry about the future. So I think it's fair to say that around the age of 40 can be the point where our worries just about hit their peak. It certainly was in my case. I had a young family, I had a new wife, I had a new house, I had a new business that I had just started, and a number of things were kind of bubbling around which didn't necessarily give me a good night's sleep, let's say. I remember one time when the worry really just got kind of out of hand. We had moved into our new house and it was brand new, and it was a one-off inside a village, and each believed that the other was making the council tax payments from their personal account. And this had actually went on for 3 years, and it was only when I was talking through our finances, because that was another worry with my wife, when we realised that neither of us had been making the council tax payments. The problem was that the council tax had not been being collected by the local authority. That meant effectively that we had something in the order of £7,000 or £8,000 of arrears, which the local authority hadn't yet discovered. We knew that it would be collected from us the moment we let them know of their mistake. Now, at that point, my business was kind of just about going, just about above ground, just about solvent, and a hit of £7,000 or £8,000 would definitely send us under. And I remember night after night lying in bed, looking up at the ceiling in the dark, worrying about exactly what the hell we were going to do. It wasn't a happy time. But at that point I began to start working out the strategies which I have been using ever since, and for me have definitely worked. And going back to that time, the first thing I realised was that I had literally lost perspective, in as much as I was lying in the dark looking at the ceiling with a world of blackness in front of me because of the darkness, obviously physically and metaphorically, and my mind was just running riot. I discovered that if I got up, went into the other room, sat down in the light and started thinking coherently about things, the dread and the worry began to clear. And it began to clear even more when I wrote the problem down. So my first learning from the point of view of this video is make your worries real, write them down. If you're worrying in the middle of the night, get up, just write down what it is you're worrying about and resolve to try and think about it more coherently the next morning, because you can't do anything at night. You can't think through these problems when you're lying in bed at night. All you're doing is burning valuable sleeping time. The point that I'm trying to make is that worry is the enemy of rationality in some respects. We build these things up, we work out the worst case scenario, and by formulating the worst case scenario, in the case that I was talking about, I could imagine that the house would be repossessed, that in some way we would be made bankrupt or something like that. Lying in the dark, I got up, wrote down the problem, looked at our finances, realised that even if the worst came to the worst and the local authority decided to collect the money the next day, we could probably get the money from somewhere. It wasn't such a problem that we couldn't overcome it. The worry was the major issue. Worry hates rationality. Worry can't survive a rational approach to things. Get your head out of the blackness and into somewhere where you've got literally a sense of perspective, so you can see things. If you can do it visually, you can do it metaphorically as well, in my view. My next way of dealing with worry, which has held me in good stead over the last 20 years especially, is just to undertake some form of physical activity. It doesn't have to be a run of 10 miles. It can be doing the dishes. It can be cleaning the house. It can be going for a walk. It can be anything. Just the act of doing something physical can break the cycle of worry. The next element of how I approach dealing with worry is based on the Stoic way of looking at the world, and I automatically can feel the fact that the moment you talk about theories and philosophers and all that stuff, it tends to move you away from the practical. In this case though, it was something I was doing already, which I discovered was a central tenet of the whole Stoic way of dealing with things. The Stoics recommend looking at your life and working out the things in it that you can affect and the things in it that you can't affect. So if we look at the modern world is a worrying place. There is no shortage of things that we can be concerned about, definitely, from the political situation, rising crime, issues like that. There are those things which have been with us for years. Some things become more problematic over time, others drop away. So the one thing which I recognised over the last 20 years or so is that for me, all that thinking and worrying about the things I can't affect does is it just brings my mood down. It just makes me feel more gloomy and makes the world feel like a more difficult place. And there is nothing I can do about these things. I've thought about them, I've looked at them, I've decided there's nothing I can do about them. In that case, I don't think too much more about them. I put them on one side. So I have one small caveat, and that is, if I can work out a way that I can make myself feel less gloomy about some situation within the world, then I'll consider it and I might do something about it. So for example, I love dogs and I hate the idea of cruelty to dogs. So I make a donation to the RSPCA here in the UK, and I also make one to the Guide Dogs for the Blind. That sort of thing makes me feel better. Does it change the way that dogs are mistreated in the UK? Well, maybe a little bit, minuscule amount in the fact that I give a small donation, but it raises my mood to know that I have done something. And that can be, if you feel strongly about a political issue, going on a march. In my view, they don't change the world too much, but they make us feel better about things, and for me that makes them valid. But the Stoics say, identify the things in the world that you can affect and worry about those if you must, but don't worry about the things that you can't affect. Likewise, something else that comes into focus a lot more as you get older is the role of other people in our lives. We live in a world with other people, and the opinions of other people, whether you like it or not, are important to us. They matter. We know they matter. And it can be a very worrying thing to have people not have a good opinion of you. But sometimes people's bad opinion of you, if they have a bad opinion of you, is not founded on anything that you've actually done or said. It's just that they've taken a dislike to you, and it's not something that you can affect. So in my case, other people's opinions of me have dropped away, and I don't worry so much about it. Now, for me personally, that was a very big change, and it happened about 10 years ago and took me a very long time to come to terms with. Having freed myself from the tyranny of trying to please people all the time and trying to be popular with people all the time, I now recognise that in fact I'm probably a nicer person as a result anyway, but it doesn't matter even if I'm not, because I'm doing my best, and that, I'm afraid, will have to do. The other area that I think is probably the hardest to deal with, and that's the fact that worry, as I've said already, worry is not a rational thing necessarily, but doesn't mean it's not powerful, and the irrational worry that we have with us can be an absolutely debilitating thing. If you think about the world where people have worries about flying in aircraft, I understand that aircraft are worrying things because fundamentally they seem to be defying the laws of gravity most of the time. But flying in aeroplanes is actually just about one of the most safest ways of transporting oneself from A to B that there is. The way I cope with these sort of irrational worries is that I have to take refuge in something, and I personally take refuge in statistics, because statistics are real. Statistics can be played with, but in the main, statistics are something that tells you how the world really works. So aircraft, they crash, of course they do, but not many of them, not very often. So what's the problem? Why do we worry about it? This sort of rational approach is hard to do. So by the way, going back to the issue with our council tax, what we did was we put the money on one side, we built up a fund, and then I basically phoned the tax office, who said, "Oh, we didn't realise you weren't paying tax. Hang on a minute, yes, you owe us £7,000, I think it was £8,000. Can you pay it?" And I said, "Well, I could pay it in about 3 months' time." And they said, "That's fine, don't worry, just send it to us over the next 3 months at some point." Literally, that whole area that kept me awake for weeks and weeks and weeks had gone, and it was nothing to worry about at all. And just think of the number of times in your life when that worry is gone and you realise that you were worrying about nothing, and it wasn't something that you needed to waste all your energy on. If we can live our lives minimising the worries, I think we will live much better, healthier lives. I think worry is one of the modern world's problems. I think it turns a technicolor world into monochrome for some people, and I'd love for us to live lives free of worry, and I hope you do. And I'll speak to you next time.